The first provocation, I guess, was aesthetic. One says, oh, what is happening to the visual appearance of the city? The fabric is being destroyed. But with it was a much deeper sense that we are losing our history, our identity, all the things that were of importance psychologically to people to want them to stay here, that we were in a sense destroying a part of the psyche of the Bombayite. And so I think we began to say, what does it take to keep your city in a state in which people enjoy the surroundings and feel in sympathy with them, the way we see across so many cities across the world, whether in Japan or whether in Europe, whether now increasingly in Australia or the United States, where there is some element of preservation legislation which regulates the way in which you can preserve those parts of your heritage which you, the local community, feels are worthy of preservation. So I think that took me into it. And then we began to learn what actually lies behind the meticulous preservation of beautiful cities. And that is that there has to be a framework of legislation of conservation, and that such a framework actually involves the city government, the local planning authority, becoming, as it were, the guardian of that heritage. Now, all of us who are working in NGOs, where we were day and night attacking the municipal government for insensitive behavior, wasteful management, not knowing what they are doing, it was a difficult change of the paradigm to believe that we could now vest the conservation of the environment in a body like the Bombay Municipal Corporation, who had been so insensitive to the way they looked after their own buildings. The problem is to preserve buildings, say like the Victoria Terminus Railway Station, or the Prince of Wales Museum, or the Taj Mahal Hotel, or indeed the Bombay Municipal Corporation headquarters itself, which are in active use and occupation and must be constantly repaired and renovated in order that their life can be prolonged. And so you need a different approach. You need an approach to conservation which clearly defines what it is that you want to keep, while allowing, and generally that is the external appearance, while allowing not just ordinary renovation, but imaginative renovation, the introduction of contemporary engineering, air conditioning, for example, which is in sympathy with what are the essential values of those buildings. If you looked gradually at the growth of Bombay, which grew from a single municipal corporation in the island city, Kolaba to Mahim, and then added on Greater Bombay, and then still in the Greater Bombay Island you have Thana, and then you introduce a metropolitan region with Panvel and a whole lot of other municipalities across the harbour, where you have now maybe 17, 18 million people, an agglomeration that will maybe increase by another 50% in the next 20 years. Then you say, what is the application of mind? What are the skills that are being deployed? How is the future growth of the city being managed? And then you begin to think in terms of, well, we are a city bounded by the sea, so do we have attributes of an island city that need to be considered? What are the major activities in the city which generate employment, and therefore how do we cater for them? Remember, Bombay was a textile industrial city and that was all closed down, so what replaces it? If we're a services city, are we a services city in terms of IT, or in terms of entertainment, Bollywood, or in terms of university education? And all of these questions then lead you to thinking about how on earth will this city ever be properly planned for its development. And then you find that these very same problems exist in virtually all the cities of India. And then you are confronted with 8% GDP growth, improvement in agricultural productivity, the growth of new townships, And then one realizes that in another 20 to 30 years, urban population in India will double. So what do we have today? The 2011 census results will probably tell us that maybe a third of India's population lives in its cities. In another 25 years or 30 years, half of India's population, half of India's then population, which means we will have from today's 300 million, maybe 800 million people living in cities. How are we preparing for that? Well, if you look at the discipline that is required to manage a city, to plan and manage and sustain a city, you will find that it isn't a single discipline. You would tend to think that the term urban planning indicates that there is a subject called urban planning. But in effect, it is the contentious interaction of a number of disciplines which involve subjects that are also taught at other universities, such as economics, law, sociology, but also with relevance to cities. So economics could take you into the economics of urban transportation, for example, or the way in which you price and sell land, the way in which you finance housing. And similarly, issues of law and justice would have great relevance in how you worry about and plan for inclusion in everything that you do. You have to find a way in an institute like the IIHS to bring all of these disciplines together, both at the faculty level and within the classroom, so that the individual who leaves the institution, though he will have majored in one or two of these sub-disciplines, will have had enough exposure to the other disciplines so that when he goes out or she goes out into society and hopefully in the main joins public services, municipalities, civil organizations, but also will end up in the private sector and also will end up in NGOs, that there is a growing sensitivity to all these issues which might bring about a more, if you like, holistic approach to planning. I think the challenges are at many different levels. The initial challenge is dealing with the regulatory authorities around the regulations that require you to frame a university of innovation, which by definition means you must be allowed to break new ground in terms of how you set your curriculum, your pay scales, and so on, and conduct your examinations. I think we will overcome those in the next, say, 18 months, and when we're well set up. Then I think the other initial challenge will be to marshal a faculty which is world-class, at the same time shares the values of the IIHS, which are around building cities and managing cities which are both diverse and inclusive, and lively and energetic and productive. We will have to innovate new ways of teaching, and we've discussed of how maybe classrooms will be taken not by a single faculty member delivering PowerPoint, but will be, and not just around cases, but will be around a situation where members of different disciplines at the faculty level are interacting with students. And then I think the crux of the success of this institute long term will be the ability to import into the institute consultancy learnings from praxis and take out from the institute the brilliant and lively ideas of a new thinking generation back into city development. So I see the institute breaking ground in a number of ways, and therefore each one of these will present its challenges.